President-elect Trump isn't in office yet, and his agenda is already in motion. Have you seen this? This week, he promised an executive order to place a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States from Mexico and Canada. Now, before we go any further, let's all get on the same page.
So let's quickly just establish what a tariff is exactly. A tariff is a tax imposed by a government on goods imported from other countries. Now, the companies importing the goods pay this tax, not the foreign governments or the foreign companies. So as an example, if I make and sell suits in America and I import the fabric from Mexico, I pay the tariff to Uncle Sam when the materials go through customs. Not Mexico, not the Mexican government, not the Mexican fabric manufacturer, me, the American company. But that's just the beginning. Here to help us make sense of this a little bit more and the strategy behind these tariffs, this is Scott Lincicome.
Vice President of General Economics at the Cato Institute, and you've taught international trade law courses at Duke University, something you have been practicing for 2 decades now. Thank you, first of all, for being here tonight.
Pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about which products these tariffs would affect.
Well, according to Donald Trump's post, it would be all imports from Canada and Mexico. And so we're really, though, when we're talking about Mexico, we talk about a lot of auto parts. We talk about a lot of fruits and vegetables. About 90% of our avocados, about 2/3 of our tomatoes come from Mexico. Yeah. And then from Canada, you're talking about a lot of energy products. And then again, also a lot of manufactured goods as well.
Well, let me get into some of that. Okay, so Canada supplies 60% of America's petroleum imports. They're the yellow line on this graph. Over the last 7 years or so, Canada passed OPEC, supplying more and more petroleum to the U.S.
Now, Mexico supplies over 70% of the fresh vegetable imports, as Scott was just mentioning. This graph kind of shows something that you posted on X, and this went pretty viral at the time with more than 500,000 views. So you share the concerns of many economists out there that if the companies are paying the higher taxes, the higher tariffs on these goods, that it really just going to be passing that on to the consumer, and folks like all of us will be paying more at the grocery store and various other items.
Yeah, sure. Especially for stuff like seasonal vegetables that you really can't get anywhere else in the country, you'd inevitably see some price hikes. And tons of economic analyses from the last time we had Trump tariffs in the news show that American consumers and companies bore about 95% of those tariff costs.
How quickly do you think it will happen?
Well, if you saw tariffs on day one, my guess is you'd actually see retailers front-running the tariffs, so actually raising prices in advance of those announcements, getting ready. And we've already seen retailers like Walmart and Lowe's and others saying, look, if the tariffs come, we're raising prices. Some places are even already raising prices.
Now, if this all happens, Trump would be going against the USMCA agreement that he enacted. That's that 2020 trade deal that Trump negotiated himself between Mexico and Canada. Is there any punishment here?
Well, trade agreements are voluntary among governments. Really, the only thing the other governments can do is get out of the agreements or retaliate. Canada and Mexico retaliated against American tariffs the last time we did this song and dance. But the if is the big question. You know, we're not at the point where these tariffs have been imposed. So there's a chance that this is all just negotiating and all just a bluster from individual Donald Trump, who's not even in office yet.
Right. He does say his ultimate goal, or one of the many goals, is to bring companies back into the U.S., that these tariffs will help bring manufacturing jobs back here. Here's a clip of him talking about that on the campaign trail.
We're going to do things that you won't even believe. These companies are going to be begging to come back, because if they don't come back and open up plants here, they're not going to be selling their product in the United States, okay?
Now, we have seen how this can potentially play out before. In 2018, Trump put tariffs on steel and aluminum. Biden then kept those in place. And as a result, employment in those industries did level out. Companies did, in some cases, move out of China. But the costs were passed on to American families, about $625 per household. And companies who use those materials lost out a lot. They lost some jobs. About 142,000 jobs were lost because of the economic impact of that.
Yeah, global manufacturing is global. About half of everything we import into the United States are industrial inputs, so things American manufacturers use to make other stuff. Couple that with foreign retaliation and currency effects that harm American exporters. And at the end of the day, protectionism is a pretty bad way to help modern manufacturing. And that's especially the case for NAFTA countries, Canada and Mexico, because the supply chains are so integrated. Something like a car seat can actually cross the border 5 or 6 times before being put in a vehicle. And that just tariffs just don't make sense in that kind of supply chain.
There have been quite a few critics about the USMCA, criticizing a variety of things. So I guess I'm wondering, is this really just Trump disrupting things, trying to get everybody back to the negotiating table, and this is him really signaling the clear sign yet that that's what he wants to do?
It's always hard to get in Donald Trump's head.
Of course.
But the last time we did this, there were a lot of instances of the president threatening tariffs on Twitter, and then governments and companies scrambled to offer some sort of deal. The president takes his victory lap and then moves on to the next thing. And I think in this case, the most likely outcome is something like that.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering, one of the things that the president-elect has been talking a lot about, of course, is the border security. And he's saying that both the northern border and the southern border have been at issue, and we have seen some numbers to be proving that. How is he going to leverage that with trade?
Well, it's a tough sell, honestly, because protectionism and tariffs hurt Americans, too. They hurt those supply chains. They raise grocery prices. So it's essentially threatening to hurt yourself to try to get governments to change course. Now, it does hurt those countries, too. And I think the hope or the thought is that it hurts them more than it hurts us, and they'll want to get to the negotiating table. And occasionally it works. But throughout history, it's not really the best way to get things done. Or instead, it's better to get together and try to work these things out without all the threats.
Could tariffs be a long-term goal? You look at, for instance, steel in China, how American steel used to be something that was global, and now China seems to have a big hold of that market. And we rely on that steel a lot. Would it be over the long haul that tariffs could create more manufacturing of steel here and other places around the world, or would we look at kind of a tariff war where all these countries are taxing each other?
It's really hard to tax your way to prosperity. I think the intellectually honest argument for tariffs is that for certain goods that are national security related, we are going to accept all the costs. We're going to accept all the retaliation. We're going to accept the uncertainty that saps investment in the United States. We're going to accept all that because these are real national security issues. But in a lot of cases, when you're talking about avocados or sugar or even some industrial inputs, the national security case isn't there. So we all just end up a little poorer and a little worse off for no real gains.
Scott Lincicome, thank you. I love it here at 7 o'clock. We actually let guests sit here and talk for a while and educate us. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Fantastic.